Hi, this is Mike Cook, and welcome to Positive Connections Radio. This show is intended to help break the stigma of mental health issues among first responders. I know from personal experience how PTSD, depression, and addiction can take over your life while suffering in silence. I was a police officer for 19 years and spent the last 10 years of my career as an undercover narcotics detective. I didn't reach out because of fear, lack of trust, shame, and stigma. It took me losing it all before I got help. With a new perspective and passion for life, I can now help others find a way out. Working together with peer support, wellness units, and the mental health and recovery field, we can bring about positive change for the ones who protect us all. The guests on this show offer unique and valuable information, support, and experience, and are the voice for those waiting to be heard. Enjoy the show. Hi, welcome back to Positive Connections Radio. This is Mike Cook. Today, we are going to talk about a subject that is very easy to avoid confronting. This may be due to many reasons, including your beliefs and shame and stigma. And today, we're talking about suicide, specifically suicide among first responders. So sit with that for a moment and breathe and just feel what emotions this word brings forth. Ask yourself the question, has someone close to you died by suicide? Have you contemplated suicide in your life? Or do you know someone right now who is suffering and they may be thinking about suicide, but you may be fearful to talk about it to them or with them? So if you relate to what I just said and you are open to listen, then please let me introduce someone who is passionate about her drive to talk about suicide. And she gives a voice to officers who can't or won't speak out. And her name is Karen Solomon from Blue H.E.L.P. Karen, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here finally.
I am too. And I think this topic is on the top of my list, and I'm very passionate about talking about this subject. Being a police officer for a while, it is easy for us to go out there and evaluate someone in the field who you may think might need to be put in for 5150 with mental health issues if they fit the criteria. But when we're talking to our partners in the field and we just came from a traumatic incident or something just happened, and they might be dealing with things personally, at their home or with other people they're dealing with, and you're seeing signs and symptoms of maybe depression, maybe something's just not right. Are we willing to actually speak the word and say, are you thinking about suicide? It is so difficult for us to ask each other about it for fear of offending someone or making them want to do it then. And it's ridiculous that we don't actually speak out because a lot of us are suffering in silence. So what do you think about what I just said? And let us know about how you started your business or your organization.
Sure. So first, let me say, I love how you described it as being able to talk about it and saying the word suicide, because that's part of the core problem is we're afraid to talk about it. We're afraid of the stigma. We're afraid to say the word suicide. So one of our slogan is watch your 12. So we talk about watch your 6. I've got your
right.
6. I've got your back, right? 6 is your back.
Sure.
So somebody said to me, well, that's the clock. If you're looking at a clock, 6 is your back. And I said, well, then if we're looking at a clock, 12 would be our front. So who is saying to us, watch your 12, watch your head, watch your heart, watch your mind, and who is watching the hearts and minds of the other officers around them? So for me, I feel like talking about it, accepting it, and knowing that we don't just need to worry about tactical safety, we need to worry about emotional safety is really, really important.
Right.
And talking about it is hard. So, for instance, today I saw an article on LinkedIn and I got really excited. It said, this police department just trained 2 crisis intervention officers and they're going to help with mental health. And I got really excited and I clicked on the article And it wasn't mental health for the police officers. It was mental health for the community. They were trained to deal with mental health crises that they respond to, not mental health crises in their department. And I understand the need in the community for mental health. I understand that officers are called upon more and more to do things outside of their scope. So they do need to be trained on crisis intervention for mentally ill people. But what about when what if the addict or the alcoholic or the depressed person is on the department? That's not something we look at. So another department recently said to me, hey, we have this crisis intervention team. Would you like to come and talk to us? Blah, blah, blah. I said, great. What's it about? And they said, for when we go out into the field and we deal with the mentally ill or the addicted. And I said, well, that's not really what I do. I'm more concerned about you being mentally ill, you being addicted. Sure. I'm talking about the police officers. So it's funny that we are able to talk about it when it comes to the police officers treating the community, but not when it comes to them treating themselves. So that's one thing that always concerns me, is that we're willing to talk about it as the community, but not as the officers. And then it goes again, we talk about this over and over, the stigma. They're supposed to be tough guys. They're not supposed to be weak. They're never supposed to let their jobs affect them. They knew what they signed up for, but that's not true. And at some point we have to face reality that it's not this tough guy culture anymore. It's not the, back in the old days, cops would joke about, how they could just, they could take advantage of people in terms of, I could just beat a confession out of them. Well, that's not acceptable, right? And it's not acceptable anymore. So it was acceptable in the past to go drink your troubles away. That's not acceptable anymore either. So as our culture is changing and evolving, this part of our culture needs to change and evolve as well, because that tough guy mentality doesn't apply anymore. It's just not acceptable. It's not the way we should be doing things. So anyway, that's why I just like how you said we don't talk about it.
And I love it. I think we need to spread awareness, and we need to get these officers to feel safe to speak about it, because holding this in, it's going to cause more and more damage. And, the statistics, especially, you supply the majority of statistics for suicide. And what I see is about 150 on average officers die by suicide a year, and that is just unacceptable. It's to see that as a way out, and I think a lot of it may be due to beliefs, faith, or lack of faith. If you have a belief and you have the stigma that suicide is something to be shameful for, and you're not providing help for the person that might be reaching out. And covertly too. I mean, police officers and first responders might be reaching out covertly and might give little signs and signals that something is just not right. They just can't speak it. And people like you actually standing up and giving talks to communities and officers helps break that stigma for sure.
Yeah, it's not just obviously it's not just in the law enforcement community, but it's a bigger problem here because of the retribution or the fear of losing their job and things like that. But I think it goes to the core of who we are as human beings. It's very tragic when someone is killed in a car accident or something that we didn't expect, and you can relate to that because you relate to that sudden death. You relate to when someone dies a natural death. You relate to when someone is killed or murdered. That's a tragedy, and we look upon it as that. But when it comes to suicide, because it's somebody taking their own lives, most people don't understand it, and they don't know what to say and don't know what to do, as is often the case in a lot of tragic situations, but more so in suicide because it doesn't hit your families. Actually, it probably hits your families more than you realize, but people lie about it and hide it so much, it's not given the opportunity to be spoken about. So back in the old days when you would talk about cancer and you'd whisper, my grandmother would whisper cancer, it's like we're whispering suicide. And until you start saying it out loud, how are we supposed to even deal with it? So if we keep hiding it, keep burying it, keep pretending it doesn't happen, you're telling everybody, yes, we shouldn't talk about it. Don't talk about it. It's bad.
Right.
You're just making that stigma worse. You're making the culture worse. You're contributing to that. And that's why I personally feel like saying suicide is okay. Somebody once criticized us because we put the word suicide on our t-shirt. And I said, well, that's what we're talking about. Why wouldn't I put it on our t-shirt?
Right.
You know, and that goes to the whole discussion about why are we so afraid to say that they killed themselves? Why are we so afraid to say that I'm scared, I'm sad, I need help? What is it that makes us as human beings look so poorly on others because they're sad or depressed or they're suicidal? It's not for us to judge, you know, it's not, things happen, you know.
Right.
So, you know, if a mother, God forbid, loses her children, and she's so depressed that she kills herself because she's now alone, we would empathize with that mother because she killed herself. Well, she killed herself because she was so sad that her children died in a car accident. And that would be okay by some measure of society, right? They would say, well, I understand that she did. And we would gather around the family and we would accept it and we would support them. But typically when you have a suicide, you don't understand because you don't know what's going on in that person's life. And you don't really know what they were dealing with because a lot of times they don't talk about it or they hide it. So you don't know why they killed themselves. So you can't support them because you don't know why and you can't empathize with it. And we need to find a way to empathize with it even though we don't know why. So we don't have to know why to be able to say, what a horrible tragedy. Let's go support their family. They lost somebody they love. What we do now is we say, oh my God, they killed themselves. I don't even want to know what's going on. Let's just walk away. And I don't know how to deal with the family, so I'm just going to not contact them. Yes. It's a weird thing to me that we are able to make that delineation in our heads about what we can empathize with and what we can't, you know? Does that make sense?
Dude, it totally makes sense, and it's based on shame. We're shameful, like, oh, I can't believe it's a decorated officer and he kills himself. What happened? Why did he do that? How could he do that to his family? How could she do that to their coworkers? And then I want to bring up too. I saw one of your talks, and it was about, and this happens probably pretty frequently, where an officer committed suicide, and he was a decorated officer, and what the department looked upon on that officer, half the department was divided. Like, we should honor this officer, and other half's like, no, he's a disgrace. Yeah.
It's terrible. And that happens quite often. It actually happened very recently. I spoke to the widow recently, and she said, they didn't know what they were going to do. The chief didn't want to honor him. The rank and file did. And she was really upset because she didn't understand what the big deal was. He had served for 18 years. And because of 18 years of clean service, 18 years FTO, he had received an Officer of the Year award, liked, respected, loved, and then a moment in time redefines his entire life. Tell me how that makes sense. It didn't change the way he'd lived. It didn't change the person he was. It just changed the time when he died. He chose to leave for whatever reason that we will never know, but it didn't change how he had behaved to that moment in time. But we're willing to forget all of that and focus on that, on the suicide. And then we think that we have the right to air every piece of dirty laundry that he ever had, even if it was a parking ticket because he killed himself. But you kill, any other death, we would have, they get a pass. We all get a pass on whatever it is we did because we died some kind of normal death that we can empathize with. But a suicide just brings out the worst in our judgment and the people and how they treat others. And that bothers me on so many levels, It
bothers me too. I mean, we look for the negatives about the person, and I think we want to avoid it. We don't want to face reality. And a lot of the times we don't want to face the reality that's going on inside of us, because someone that we know tragically dies by suicide, and we might look in ourselves and say, you know what, I have this stuff that I've been shoving down for so many years. I've seen all these different scenes. I don't feel like I'm even a part of this organization. I'm separate from society now. And I can't talk to anybody, and it brings up emotions. We don't want to look at ourselves, so we rather avoid it and make a rationalization that it was a wrong thing, it was a moral failing, and a lot of it is based on what you believe. You know, if you're very religious or even somewhat religious, and it might be a sin, and people that get to the point that decide that this is the only option left. If they had any kind of faith, when you lose your faith, what do you have? You don't have any faith anymore, and you're hopeless, and you're shameful, and you're regretful, and especially in the culture of first responders and law enforcement, we're held to a higher standard. We're taught we're the protectors. We're the one that's going to save you. We're the one that's going to be there for you. We can't show any weakness, and if we do, hey, you know what? That's your problem. Go deal with it. Come back when you're well. And do we tell them where to go? And I think your organization, I'd like you to talk a little bit about Blue H.E.L.P. too. I think every police department in this world should at least know what you do, what your name is, and what your goals are to spread awareness about this.
So what we do is, Blue H.E.L.P., it's bluehelp.org, www.bluehelp.org. What we are doing is we embarked on a 5-year project to collect suicide data. And other organizations had collected it, not in not a year-over-year collection. It was every few years, and they had certain criteria and whatnot. So we said, hey, why don't we just for 5 years collect the data and see if this data is even real? Because we wanted to know what really is going on. So we put up this form on our page, and anybody who knows of a suicide of any year can put it on this form and report it. And we are collecting all that information. It's very, very, very confidential. It doesn't go anywhere. We never share the names or even the departments, no matter how public the suicide, because we understand, there's a lot of stuff involved, and we just don't want to contribute to that pain. So we have a counter. We do put it on our Facebook and our LinkedIn pages and say, suicide number 132 occurred last night, our sincere condolences, but we don't identify them ever until the family gives us permission, because you will see that we do share their stories, but we do it once the families are ready. So far this year, we are up to 146 suicides. Last year, there were 159. And here's the thing. We have a name attached to every single one of them. We have their name, their age, their years of service, their department, whether or not they sought help, were they a veteran, how many kids do they have. We have 25 data points. So we know these are real people. These aren't guesses. These aren't John Doe's. We validate every single one of them so that we know it's a good number. And we can tell you, were they injured on duty? Were they on administrative leave? Were they under investigation? Was it a murder-suicide? How many days from retirement were they? Because some of them killed themselves within a month or two of retirement. Were they retired? How long? A month or two, 2 years, 3 years. So we keep a pretty tight lid. We work with the Correctional Peace Officers Foundation, because we try to do apples to apples with what would go on the wall. So if a CO was killed, would he go on the wall in DC? Yes. So if he kills himself, do we count him? Yes. Would he go on the wall in DC? No. Do we count him anyway? Yes, but we can call that out, So we know who's sworn and who carries a gun and all that. So our number is a pretty tight number. And again, we can divide it up. So there's been 146 suicides this year. That's one cause of death. As of today, there have been 138 line of duty deaths with 13 different causes of death. 17 of those deaths were heart attacks. 14 were 9/11 illnesses. If you take out every non-felonious cause of death, you end up with less than 60 line of duty deaths, meaning less than 70. It's between 60 and 70 officers that were actually killed on the job. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't an illness. It wasn't a heart attack. They didn't fall. These are, real, true being killed on the job. So there's a stark difference between the number of officers that are killing themselves and the ones being killed by other people. So to me, that's a big distinction. And I recently was talking, about so we have 17 officers who died of a heart attack, and they're considered a line of duty. How is a physical injury different than a mental injury? Because if you think about what a suicide is and what brings you to that point, oftentimes it's a mental illness, it's an addiction, it's depression, it's imagine your worst day, the day you found out your mother died or your father died or your sister died, or you were just so depressed over something you couldn't get out of bed. Amplify that 10 times. You can get up and ask for help. You're not going to get fired. Your friends are going to say, oh my gosh, you've had a rough time. Let me help you through it. Well, now be a cop, be in that situation, be in your bed, all that life stuff. And then on top of it, you have all the other life stuff that you've picked up from everybody else, all their death, their destruction, their sadness. And then know that you could lose your job, that you can't go to your coworker and say, hey, help me. Because they're not going to say, hey, I got it. I got your back. Let's go get you help. That's not always going to happen. The culture is changing for sure. And that is happening. And that's what we need to happen. And so many guys and chiefs, and this is what gets me. You have your command staff. They've been through this. They've been through this career. They know what it feels like. They've been depressed. They need to accept that it's a reality and admit, yeah, we needed help too, but we didn't get it. So let's get you some help, So we need to recognize that this is something that's uncontrollable. It's not as if you can just go, hey, I'm not going to be depressed today. It's definitely a disease. It's definitely an injury, and it should be treated as such.
Right.
So anyway, I'm sorry, I got off on a tangent there, but so what our organization does is we collect the statistics. We offer support to the survivors. We send out care packages to the families in the departments after a suicide and a note letting them know we're here. We have organized some grief camps for next year for the kids, similar to what they give for the line of duty. There's no suicide grief camps for the kids after a suicide. There's no grief camps at all after a suicide for any first responder families. We have organized a dinner at Police Week next year to honor the service of officers we've lost to suicide. And we are working on an app, a mental health app. We have a database of resources. So if people need something, we can direct them to the right place, because while we don't provide services, we've collected a pretty substantial list of resources around the country who do. So we're happy to send people to other people. And that's really it. We really try to be there for the survivors. So a widow called me today. Her husband died in 2016. It was the first time she contacted us. Right. And she said, we're falling apart here. We need some help. What can I do? So we're going to help her, and we're going to get something out to her and her kids. And because she happens to be in the state where we are going to hold our first grief camp next year, we're going to make sure her kids get there. So we're trying to reach out. I've said to people, consider us a cross between the COPS organization, the Concerns of Police Survivors, and Officer Down Memorial Page, because we'll put the names and faces up. We put the dates up as they happen, and we want to support these survivors in the way that we support other survivors. See, an officer dies of cancer or leukemia. We're running out to help them, help their family. They get benefits. These families get no benefits. Their health insurance gets shut off within days. They don't necessarily get the pension. They don't get any fundraisers, and they're just pretty much lost to the Blue Line family. And we want to change that. We want to make sure that these guys, they gave their lives literally and figuratively to the service, to the law enforcement. And the least we can do is let their families know we're still here, because God forbid you did something to yourself tomorrow. Do you really want people to ignore your family because you killed yourself? Do you that's just not right, and it's not fair, So survivor support is a big thing for us, as well as collecting the data, because no one else collects the data. We have law officers killed and assaulted. We have all kinds of data on law enforcement, and we don't have any on suicides, and it's a shame. It's shameful.
And it is, and it's not. And I love what you said, and you're not on a tangent. I can listen to you forever, because I think what you said, I can tell your passion. And you are doing such a good work in creating such positive change. And the grief counseling too. I mean, the families are left behind. And the departments are technically basically turning their backs and saying, well, it's not an on-line duty. They're not going to be honored. And well, good luck with what you're going to do with your life. I don't know what you're going to do, and they're left just empty, and they need to express what's going on. And the grief is such a powerful thing to live with if you don't get help.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, when I start talking, forget it. I could go on for hours about this. Yeah. But so there was a case in another state, I'm not going to name the state, but an officer was engaged. He had been on the job for 6 years. He died in a car accident on duty. He was engaged to be married. He had 2 children with this woman. When he died, they weren't married, but they changed the law so that she could get full benefits as if they were married, and it was a line of duty death.
Wow.
Well, within the same year, an officer who had 12 years of service, double the service, was married, had 2 children. He killed himself. She lost her benefits within 30 days and gets 60% of his pension. And so when they changed the law, I read the article recently. They said the reason they changed it was they did it, it would be tragic. Those were their exact words. It would be tragic for the children to be penalized for the poor judgment of the parents, meaning the parents didn't get married. Right, well, how tragic is it for the other family's children to be penalized because the officer killed himself? It's the same thing. He killed himself as a direct result of the job, and it can be tracked back. He had asked for help. He didn't get the help. It got worse. He asked for more help, and it was a downward spiral. It can be traced back legitimately to the job. So to look me in the face and say, we're going to give this guy's family, not that they don't deserve it. I'm not in any way saying they don't deserve it. What I'm saying is it's not fair to change the rules because a car accident on duty is considered a line of duty death, but an officer who suffered because of his job, sought help on the job, and then killed himself, and we're going to penalize his family. You know what I mean? And even in the cases where an officer dies off duty, we give him a funeral with honors, some of the honors, right? Not the full honors, but we give him some. Well, these suicides, their officer died off duty. Guess what? They don't even get a freaking flag half the time. So I just, I get really riled up. So just tell me, somebody sit me down and explain to me why that's okay, and nobody has yet to do that to me, to convince me. And until somebody can, and until you can convince every single family out there with their kids crying themselves to sleep because their dad killed themselves, that this is okay to treat them in that way, I'm just going to keep going until we can change things.
Well, and we all know what the answer is, right? It's not okay. It is not okay. And it's not right. And it's not fair. And we need to stand up and actually face the truth that this is an epidemic among law enforcement. And it's not just the officer that does this. This is the whole entire family that suffers the rest of their lives with this, especially if we don't provide empathy and care and understanding and guidance and direction to try to piece this together. And we call ourselves the law enforcement family. We call ourselves, we stand behind this family, and we'll die by them. We will back them up no matter what. Even if we don't necessarily like them as an individual, we're on the same team. But something like this happens, alcoholism, drug addiction, they do something. We turn our backs and we say, nope, okay, well, he's not one of us anymore. The whole family is excommunicated, and we need to carry on and with our image that we're above this, and this does not affect everybody in the department. And in fact, it does.
Yeah, and not just that. Over the last 6 months, I know of 3 children of these officers who have attempted to kill themselves as well. Because not only do they think it's an okay solution now because their dad did it, but they have no support. The department is gone. These people that they lived with for their whole lives, that hung out with their dad, that came to their cookouts, are gone. They've got no role model. The department just, and I get it. It's really hard. I get that you also love the officer. But think about these kids and the domino effect that we're having on these children by telling them, you're ashamed to us. We're ashamed of you because your dad killed himself. So they're saying, oh, geez, I have no one that loves me anymore. My dad killed himself. This world is a terrible place and nobody's helping me. So I think I'm just going to kill myself too. You know what I mean? And I mean, I'm oversimplifying it, but I just trying to get the message across that this doesn't just end with when the suicide occurs. It goes on. There was an officer who killed himself on the way home from another officer's funeral because, I mean, and the problem too is people don't know any of this because no one is hearing their stories until now. Right. And we're definitely making a change. Cultures, departments around the country, and not necessarily because of Blue H.E.L.P, but because of other reasons and because it's the right thing to do to finally start to change the culture. And it is changing. It's just changing too slowly. And people are giving it lip service, and they're publishing papers, and they're giving you statistics, and I believe the thing that makes us stand out is the fact that we have these families, we have their stories, we share their stories, we take them with us, we put them front and center, because until we can make you feel what they're feeling, until we can make you cry the way they cry, you're not going to get it. You're not going to, you have to feel it to really feel that it's important to you, because everybody has their own passion, whether it's hunger or cancer. Why do most people support cancer research and join that and do those walks? Because somebody they know died of cancer. Right. Well, when you start to feel the pain and someone you know dies of suicide, then you're going to join the suicide walk. I don't want to wait that long. I want you to join us now. I want you to stop this now. I want every law enforcement officer in the country to take a step back and say, where am I mentally? Where are my friends mentally? Where is that family that disappeared after, John killed himself last year? How can I make this change? How can I, and this is what I always say, do you want to be the cop that finds your friend dead of suicide, or do you want to be the cop that changes it so your friend doesn't kill himself? That's what you should be asking yourself.
Exactly. And in the media and, the social media out there, they might report a suicide, but, and we can empathize with it. And a lot of us will say, oh, that's a shame. I wish things were different. I wish we all understood. Well, then we have to think about this. What is the solution then? What can I do to help? What can I do that will actually be part of the solution, where that we can start giving officers the help that they need and the families that they need, and understanding and do something about it. And your organization is spreading awareness, and it's growing. And I know it's not growing at the pace that we wish that it would grow, but Right. It is growing, and it isn't a positive. And that's why I wanted you so badly to be on this podcast, because I want to reach as many people as possible. I know there's family members out there that have lost people from suicide, and they're stuck in their own living torment right now, and they don't know what to do. And there has to be a way that they can reach out, even if it's a phone call, even if it's some kind of guidance and understanding that, hey, it's okay to feel what you're feeling. There is help available, and to start talking about it, because it's so shameful to talk about it. We'd rather just bury our heads in the sand and just wish that it would just go away.
I agree. And it's a funny thing you mentioned, that we share the stories. So we'll share, the photo of the officer and his story, and it doesn't go viral the way a line of duty death was viral, which is a shame too. And, we obviously don't have that kind of social media following, but you would think that, we had a photo last night. Early this week we put up, we've had 120,000 hits on that photo of that officer. But it's still not considered viral. It's not, we don't have social media followers as a result of that. So it makes you wonder that all these people who commented it, liked it, and shared it, what are they thinking when they share it? And oftentimes they don't share it at all. So for instance, we had 4 suicides this past weekend, right? In law enforcement around the country. 4 suicides. If we had 4 line of duty deaths over the weekend, the media would be in a frenzy. No one knows. No one, even when they are published, it's such a fleeting, oh, look, another Chicago officer killed himself in the car, and then what? So what are you going to do next other than just report it? Again, it is picking up steam. NBC recently did a survey. They have coverage now. They're doing a story in Chicago. They just did one in LA. They have another one in California today, in San Francisco area they're doing. Boston has done one. Providence has done one. And I know that they've done one because we've been involved with those stories. But but we need every state, every NBC affiliate in the country to pick up that story and talk about it.
Sure.
And to really say, hey, what's going on? And somebody asked me yesterday, they said, somebody here at work, they said, do you think the numbers among law enforcement or first responders were higher than the general public? And I said, statistics are a hard thing, because is it higher because of the type of people that become first responders? So you have the general population and you have all these personality types, but typically when you have a first responder, you have more of a certain personality type, and maybe that personality type is more prone to suicide. I don't know, because I'm not a statistician, but what I'm saying is I just don't feel like it's a fair comparison. It's really hard deciding whether or not we have more suicides among first responders. But what I do know is they do carry a heavier burden, and we know what a lot of the tipping points is, or the breaking point, what I like to call it, is what was the breaking point before they killed themselves? Was it a financial issue? Was it something at home? Was it the case of an officer in West Virginia who had been walking the banks of a river for days looking for the bodies of somebody that had drowned, and he couldn't find him, and he gets home to get a text message saying that somebody he arrested was being let out on bail again. And that was the breaking point for him. It was the last straw after days of weariness and anguish and dead children in a river. And he gets a text saying, hey, blah, 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 this guy is going free again. And for him, that was the last straw. So whatever was going on in his mind, he didn't have financial problems. He didn't have marital problems. He had, empathy problems, and it had built up and built up and built up, and he just had it. So, and his wife was present at the time, which is even more tragic. So what is the breaking point for these officers, and what is bringing them to that, and how much of this job bears down on that burden,
And you look at the quality and the of the officers that are hired, and they're tested, and they are they're able to deal with a lot of circumstances that the general public wouldn't even think about, or even be interested or be able to handle the situations. And so they're on a different, plane where they're dealing with these tragic instances, and they're trained and more prone to be able to absorb it and not be affected and surprised, and down the road it does build up. So to compare first responders to the general public and the statistics around it, I'm sure that your statistics are a lot lower than they could be if all the cases were brought forth. A lot of them aren't determined suicide, or there are unreported suicides.
Yeah, so that's the thing too, is we don't know, right, how many. So we started on January 1st, 2017, we had counted 138 suicides. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. On January 1st of 2018, we had counted 138 suicides for 2017. Okay. As of today, we are at 159. We've had that many more reported to us. As we become more well-known, people are reporting to them as they know they can trust us, and their names and information is given to us in confidence because they haven't told their neighbor yet, or they're afraid. They're not going to gain anything because they didn't lie. They didn't get any benefits or anything, but they're just ashamed and they haven't talked about it. So they know they can trust us because we're not giving names and personal information. So they're starting to pick up steam and send us the information. We are now finding out about suicides within hours, sometimes within minutes of the suicides, because people are starting to figure out, hey, we need to tell Blue H.E.L.P so they can add it to their number. So that's really good. So what we care most about right now is people telling us what's going on, because that's really important, because you cannot solve a problem if you don't know the scope of a problem. It's just standard problem solving. What are you trying to solve? How bad is the problem? And what are the things that are causing it, so we can find a solution. And without this data, I don't imagine that we can ever solve the problem. Because if you don't know what it is or how often it's happening, how are you going to fix it?
No, and you're right. And you can't, and to get the word out too, and open up the dialogue, even with the family members, they're looking for help. Something's up with their loved one that, they're noticing things. And how do you talk to a loved one about this? How do you bring it up? Maybe, go to counseling. I mean, how many officers are willing to I need to go see a psychologist? When I was a cop, most of the time you think, well, if you're seeing a psychologist, I don't care what kind of doctor, if it's something for your head, they're a shrink. And the word shrink is such a stigma against that. No one wants to know they've been going to a shrink, because then there's something wrong with you. And not because you have a mental illness or that you're crazy, you're unfit to do your job. So and a lot of officers bring their pain home to the house, and they won't talk about it. And their loved ones are afraid to even mention it. And to speak about this and to say suicide to someone and to someone that you love, I think it's so important to get that out, because it's the elephant in the room. You're not going to talk about it and just hope that it goes away. And unfortunately, it has tragic consequences.
You think about, I could tell you how many wives have said to me, I suspected something was going on, but I didn't know where to get help. And I didn't want to tell his department because I didn't want him to lose his job because of me. Well, there are so many people out there that deal with first responders who can provide them assistance. There's some great therapists out there. There's some great peer support groups. They just need to know how to get to them. And that's part of the problem. Nobody knows where to turn for help. Right. And the wives, like I said, they're afraid. They can't go to the chief or their sergeant or the lieutenant and say, hey, my husband's struggling. We had the woman whose husband wouldn't cook meat because of the smell of burning flesh.
I just read that today.
Yeah. So that was, not a good story, but it's a good example of how she knew there was something wrong. She couldn't get help. She was afraid. And then what? So, and that's one of the services we provide. We have a database of resources, and we will, you can confidentially search our database, or we'll search it for you and we'll say, hey, here's some therapists. So I'm in Massachusetts. I know 3 guys off the top of my head. So anybody from Massachusetts calls me, I give them their number right away. And they always get an appointment. I know, so we have different regions of the country. We have different areas. We have somebody in every state. And we have hotlines that you can call. Because if we can't get you it, we'll say, hey, here, call this number. So call Copline or call Cop to Cop, and they will help you find some resources. Call Wounded Officers Initiative. They've got a great peer support line in Florida. So so that's part of it too, is we aren't, we try very hard to find other organizations that are doing this, because we know we're not the only game in town. We don't want to be. We want to make sure that it's awareness, and push the information out, because you can go to the VA. The VA has this amazing website for PTSD if you're a veteran, with all kinds of resources and in a search capacity. We need that for first responders. We need a clearinghouse for information where a first responder can go and know he's not going to get in trouble, look for a therapist or whatever it is he needs, a financial manager, and go and fix your life without it having to go through your EAP program or something.
Right.
We have an instance of a chief. He implemented this amazing program. He got his city to put a therapist on retainer. So if his officers need help, they call the therapist, 100% confidential. At the end of the month, the therapist bills the city for the number of hours he worked. He doesn't tell them who he talked to. He just gives them a total, hey, 12 hours this month, I talked to some cops, And that's a really cool program. And they trust it, and they know they're going to get help, So people are becoming more creative and finding ways to help their officers so their officers feel comfortable.
And that's what we're doing in San Diego too. San Diego Police Department and Fire Department. I work really closely with them and their peer support groups and their captain and lieutenants. And they do have a program just like that, where the city pays yearly for this service for psychological services. One of them is called Focus, and it's 15, 20 miles away from the department, and the officers can go there as many times as they want during the year. Yeah. And they go through one door, they go into the office, they see a therapist, it's safe, it's confidential, they leave through the back door. It's like, and it's an unmarked building, it's an office building, it's not anywhere near the police department, and it's not taken back to the department and your sergeant lieutenant's not knowing what you're doing. You're going there getting guidance and help. And a lot of times I work with the therapists. I know a few therapists that are therapists now that were police officers. They're retired, and they're actually providing services and helping these individuals that feel that they're afraid to actually ask for help because they don't want to be found out by the EAP or their department at all. And EAP is great also. I mean, they provide confidential help where it doesn't go back and no one knows. But see, my goal is this. I want to connect with all the people like you, just like you said, all the therapists around Massachusetts, New York, Chicago, LA, all the positive ones, the ones that are providing positive, confidential help, and somehow, change this, because this is so needed in our society right now to spread awareness and get help to people.
I agree. And it's funny, just, what you just talked about a therapist, it just brought to mind. So last year I had a situation over a 3-month period. My mother, my stepfather, and my uncle died. And it was a really hard time for me because it was all very sudden deaths. And I went to work one day and I just completely had a meltdown because I didn't realize how hard it had hit me. And I was trying to take care of my kids and move forward. And I went to my boss's office and I said, look, I was crying. I said, I'm having a really hard time because of these deaths. I need some time off. And they said, what do you need? I said, I need 2 weeks. I'm just going to go home and I'll see you in 2 weeks. I need some time off. And they said, okay, go take care of yourself. Imagine a cop. And I went back to work. No problem. Right. Nobody questioned me. Hey, how you doing? You're doing better? Great. We're so happy you're back. So sorry for your loss. Imagine a cop going into his chief's office going, hey, I'm really having a bad time. I need 2 weeks off. And the chief going, sure.
Right.
Take 2 weeks off. Come back. No problem. Never going to happen.
Right.
So that going in the front door and being able to go out the back door is just made me think of that we need to be able to treat these guys and gals the way we would treat other people. And that is by getting this network set up and letting them know and being able to go in the front door and out the back door without it being a problem. And until we know who all these people that are providing services, you can't do that because it's still such a big secret,
Yes. Exactly. And that's to spread awareness and help. And I get calls a lot of times from these organizations saying, hey, I have an officer. They should be calling you. Most of the time, they don't even give me their names. And my number is free to everybody to call. And they'll call. I'll talk to them. I'll tell them my story, where I'm working at, what I'm doing. And I want to be able to refer them to ethical and trustworthy people in the field that understand this population, that can speak a police officer talk or firefighter talk. Maybe a lot of the therapists weren't former law enforcement or first responders, but I deal with the ones that totally get them and can be on their level and talk to them. And it's just amazing when it does work and they're able to get better, seek help, and work on the shame and the fear and the guilt and remorse and the hopelessness feelings, get their family back in order and go back to the department, and then they can be the sounding board and a trustworthy person if they choose to for other officers, and they might be able to be there for support and then lend guidance. And it's gonna be it's contagious that way because it'll spread more quickly.
Right. And I'm not Debbie Downer. Believe me, there's a lot of great stories out there of officers who were brought back from the edge and they're still working. We released a video not too long ago of a 911 call where the wife thought her husband had killed himself. He did not. And she immediately, upon finding out that he didn't kill himself, she was horrified. She said, oh my God, I never should have called. Please go back. Don't tell his department. Right. And it was really cool. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a really good video because it shows you just how deep the stigma and fear runs. Mm-hmm. And the good thing about that is the officer did get help. He is still working. He did have to face some disciplinary action that's probably going to dog him for his career, but the end of game is that he was able to get back to work. He's back on the promotion track, and you can, you're going to have to, eventually people forget and it goes away. But making it through that is the hardest part of all, right? Coming back from that because he fired off his gun. But most officers don't get to that point where they fire off their gun and they survive. So the ones who ask for help, his is a good story of being able to get back to work. There's lots of those stories. There are departments that are very supportive. There are departments that will help. But yesterday I was talking to some ladies from the Department of Justice, and I think it was Giglio they were talking about. And that was like one of the concerns, that if you're on a case and the prosecutor looks into your background and sees that you had left work for stress leave or something, that goes to part of the problem and the stigma. Right. That these guys are afraid that if they get help, it's going to ruin a case somewhere down the line. So we need to do better, but we need to tell those good stories, and we do try to tell those good stories. So we have officers who come to us and say, hey, I battled addiction, I did this,
Sure.
and I'm back at work. And we will share those stories, absolutely. We don't just share the bad ones, we share the good ones. We want people to know that you can successfully get back to work and survive your career.
Exactly. You can survive through, so the severe struggles in life, no matter what, and to know that you're not alone. And I know personally that you can get through anything if you just reach out for help. And it's okay to ask for help, because don't you want to go back to your department and be the best officer that you can be, and be there for other people also. And you get through it. And I think the good stories are great. It's inspirational for people to hear that, because it lends them more hope. And a lot of times you hear these stories and they're tragic, but this individual gets through the situation, and the person that is seeking help hears this story and they go, well, you know what? My story is really, really bad. I'm suffering from a lot of different things, but that person got through something that was so much more worse than I'm going through right now. There is hope. There is hope. And we have to spread that, and we have to stop shying away from this. And I'm talking about the media too, and the news. They do a story about it. Yeah, officer, tragically kills himself. And let's move on to this story, and there's more publicity around things negative about the police, about what officers have done and the crimes that they've done.
Yeah.
And instead of what kind of help are we providing for them, and what kind of services are out there that they can reach out to, confidentiality, they can talk about this stuff and not worry about any kind of retribution or stigma that's associated with it.
And what's interesting to me, obviously we do get a lot of the details from the families and the officers on scene. We always hear about suicide, about how often the person pulls the trigger or they jump off the bridge and they immediately have regrets, right?
Right.
Well, some of these officers have shot themselves multiple times. And obviously that's not released in the press. It's just not. But imagine that you're that desperate that you shot yourself, you didn't die, and you continue to shoot yourself until you do die. Wow. What in the world is going through? What is it that we have done so wrong? Because if I shot myself and I was like, oh my God, I don't want to die, that's not where their mind is going. Their mind is going, oh my God, I didn't die. So what is it that we are perpetuating, this feeling that even after the first gunshot, when they've been spared, it's still not okay. They still need to die. What have we done as a culture to them? You know what I mean?
We have, and it's our responsibility to change it.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. And I had a friend who used to say you can fix anything but death. And sometimes when I'm going through a really bad time, it's like the mantra in my head, you can fix anything but death, Karen. You can fix anything but death. Because you can. You can fix just about anything. Death, you can't fix it. You're dead. You're gone. It's over.
Right.
You can get a new job. You can make more money. You can get on a budget. You can buy a new house. You can find a new love. You can work through your pain. And there's just so many. I'm not saying it's easy, because it's not. It's super hard, but you still have an option as long as you're alive.
Exactly.
Yeah. So.
It's great. It's so great having you on my show. And it's actually our show. It's not just my show. This is intended to get out to people so they can have a different perspective and know that it's okay to talk about this kind of stuff. And this is so dear to my heart because, I don't know what's the end solution to all this, but I know people like you that are fighting for this, that are there and they're empathetic about it, and they're not there to make a profit on this industry, recovery industry, PTSD, because there's a big trust issue in law enforcement community. I didn't trust, recovery. I didn't trust people, counselors and psychologists. That's the last time I would have never asked for help, and I didn't. And you wrote a few books too, didn't you? Write Heart Beneath the Badge. Yeah. And you're the co-author of The Price They Pay.
Yes, and all of those proceeds go back to Blue H.E.L.P. We don't keep any of the money for ourselves, and as we talked about before, we are 100% volunteer, so we're definitely not in this for the money. Right. We are 100% of our board donates to our cause financially to make sure that we have the money that we need when we need to do something. So it is. Again, and I talked about this, trust is a very hard thing in law enforcement. And it was funny because somebody once, when I first started this, when I wrote my first book, someone in the law enforcement industry said, I said, they noticed that I was giving the proceeds of my books to charities. And they said, why are you giving it to charity? I said, well, these aren't my stories. I listened to officers tell me their stories and I wrote them on paper. This doesn't belong to me. So I'm going to donate the money back to law enforcement. And she said, you can make money off this. And I really was taken aback. And I said, well, that's interesting because it's not a machine where you have these 900,000 cops where if all of them give me $1, I could be a millionaire, That's not, I don't want to do that. I have a full-time job. I feel like sometimes there's something that's so important that it's worth the sacrifice, and it's so important to so many other people because they're suffering, and it's just the right thing to do. At some point in time, you search your soul, whether it's picking up the kitten from the side of the road and taking it home, or picking up this stick and talking about law enforcement and running with it. So everybody in their life does something on a different scale that's charitable and that you don't need to make money on it because it's the right thing to do. And we all do it on a different scale. So for me, this was the scale. And I've never forgot that statement because I'm very cautious now of people in the law enforcement industry because of that.
Right.
Because, who's here really because it's the right thing to do, and who's here because you want to make money. And I'm very cognizant of that now. I went into this very naively and very trusting, and it's not, we're not here. No one should be here to make money off this. We should be here to save lives. And that's why the money from the books goes right back to Blue H.E.L.P. Prior to Blue H.E.L.P, it went to other charities, but now it goes directly to Blue H.E.L.P. Because, it's for the families.
And that is so important too. And we need to bind together with that also. And it's so important to understand that. And the trust is part of that too. We're always thinking like these organizations are there to take our money and they're going to BS us and come into our apartments and give this spiel about how we can help each other. But, talking to you and knowing your organization and knowing other organizations and bonding together for this same cause is going to affect positive change and trust. And I think it's so, so important. And what is your, so let's give your email out again and any information that people can contact you and get a hold of you.
Our website is www.bluehelp.org. You can contact us by sending us a note to contact@bluehelp.org. And you can also check out our database, which we are constantly working to add to because we need to add to it. It's hard to find resources at First Help, 1ST, help, HELP.net. And anytime, reach out to us. We will help you find what you need. If you're a family that's lost somebody to suicide, please reach out to us. We are happy to put you in touch with other families. And just when we roll at the grief camps, obviously we want to send your kids. So absolutely, we're here. And like I said, if we don't know or if we can't provide you what you need, we will certainly send you to somebody else who can. We have absolutely no issue doing that.
Awesome. So awesome and so important. This is great. It's so great talking to you.
Thank you.
To end this, I know there's officers out there listening right now. I know that there's family members that are contemplating like contacting somebody. What would you say to those people right now to give them some kind of encouragement and hope?
It's hard because people will say, well, you're shaming them into surviving. And we're not shaming them into surviving. We're telling them that your families are going to miss you. Your friends are going to miss you. And whatever it is that's troubling you, like I said, you can fix it. And I know that job sometimes seems like it's the most important thing to you, and you don't want to lose your job, and you don't want to be embarrassed by your emotions. But emotions are a human thing, and you can get through this without everybody knowing what you're going through. So if your biggest fear is people finding out what you're going through, take it off the table. There's ways to get help without anybody knowing, and you can get through it. We can put you in touch with other officers who have so many success stories. And I don't want your name on my wall. I don't want your date of death on my wall. I don't want to talk to your wife because you've killed yourself. I want to hear from you because you have gotten help and you have a success story you can share. and that will help other officers get help.
Great. Thank you again so much, Karen.
Thank you.
All right, and everybody else, please give Karen a call, and until next time, have a great week. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Positive Connections Radio, in affiliation with Mental Health News Radio. Have a great rest of your day, and until next time, be strong, stand up, speak your truth, and break the stigma.